Hello, good afternoon, and welcome again to another NHT Discovery Education Pathway webinar. It's great to have your company today, and I hope I know we're going to have a really interesting conversation this afternoon with another. We have these brilliant guests, don't we, on these webinars? And I have to say they're the highlight of my month. Actually, I hope they are for you as well, because we have some really interesting conversations with people who are doing the job and smashing it. It's a nice, honest, and authentic conversation with people who, as I said, who like us are in the thick of education at the sharp end, and that's certainly true of our brilliant guest today. We're going to talk about changing the narrative around professional development. What do we really mean by professional development, and how can we move towards a more holistic approach where we support the whole teacher in front of us? The mantra, as I've often said, is self-indulgence is not well-being, looking after yourself, self-care. They're not a self-indulgence, are they? They're a duty. They're a duty, I think, so that we present the best version of ourselves. But I'm getting preachy now, and I'll stop, because you haven't tuned in for me. You've tuned in to listen to our brilliant guest during this conversation around a new approach to professional development. And we're going to find out from our guest actually how she's delivering on this message in her own school with her brilliant deputy as well. If you want to join in the discussion, you know we love to do that. We love to hear your comments and so forth, and let's make it a two-way chat if we can. And I will be sharing your comments and your questions throughout this webinar with our guests. Find out more, because we are going to be mentioning Pathway briefly. Kirsten, our guest, we'll look into what she's been doing with the Pathway program and how she's been sucking the most juice out of it and getting the most value out of it in her school and with her staff. So you can find out more about that by clicking on the URL there. And I know my brilliant colleague, my brilliant colleague Bobby, will be sharing chit chat. I should say actually that since our last webinar, I've come back into headship. I'm taking on a school again, which is why I'm probably tongue-tied, because it's been one of those days. So we'll have a nice, authentic discussion. Join the discussion on social media using #TheWholeTeacher. And as I said, find out more from my brilliant colleague, Bobby, who'll be sharing the link on the chat, I'm sure, as we speak. Right, nearly there. Kirsten Marriott is our brilliant guest, head teacher at Hemingford Grey Primary. She joins us now, and her fabulous deputy head, Danielle Jones, as well, also at Hemingford Grey Primary. So there we are. That was a somewhat tongue-tied introduction, but I think we got there in the end, and it's fabulous to have your company today. We're going to have about half an hour, 40 minutes to have a discussion. We've got some nice questions prepared, but as always on these things, we tend to go off piece sometimes, depending on what the comments and the questions are that come in from everybody. So use the chat, use the Q&A button if you like, and I will keep an eye on that, and we'll keep this a two-way street. Right, let me stop sharing and say hi and welcome to Kirsten and to Dan. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, really good to be here.
Was your day I'm sure it was as frantic as mine? It's been a fun one today.
Yeah, they always are.
Yeah, it's been a busy one.
Same.
Great, I'm sure it was. Well, in that case, I mean, extra special thanks then for giving up the time at the end of a busy day. Well, it's not, let's face it, it's not the end of a busy day, is it yet? I'm sure there's more to come. But let's sort of kick off, if we may, just briefly. We talked about a cultural reset. Whenever we chatted, haven't we? We've talked about this idea of a reboot, if you like, a reset post-pandemic, when we're kind of back in person. And notwithstanding that, I know many people on the call, including at your school, will have been in person right through, because they're managing the care and the needs of key workers' children. But as a whole, we're back in person. So what have we learned now that we've grown, and how have we grown since lockdown? What's the different, what has changed in this academic year in terms of your leadership of colleagues? Shall we start with that? What have we learned from the last 18 months, and how has it changed how you view colleagues?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Andrew. I think so. For us, we had about a year as new leadership to the school. We had about a year before the pandemic hit. So we were on a trajectory of wanting to have a bit of a cultural reset anyway. And I think more than anything, the pandemic gave us a chance to really reflect on what we wanted, and almost an excuse actually to sort of stop and reset some of those things. I think we really felt that the building of the school is here. We've got a lovely building, we've got schools have got lovely buildings, and we just feel that actually the building could be a lot of bricks and windows and all those things, but actually above all else, the pandemic's led us to really see that it's about people. You know, the school's about people, it's about a human, it's about connections, it's about valuing the people within it, and it's about all the stakeholders. So I think that that's really brought into kind of our leadership around how we want to move the school forward. We want to be able to build those connections with our stakeholders, and that's not just something that comes from the top as leadership. Actually, that's something that we need to make sure that our teachers are building with parents, that we're building with our governors, and that we have open communication with all of them. So I think that it's been a real opportunity for us. I don't think it's been a barrier. It's been a real opportunity for us to look at how we want things to be in the future and do something about it, and keeping those connections, those human connections with governors, with staff, be it all virtual, has kind of created that for us.
It has. I mean, I'm sure it's always been there, but it's kind of brought it into sharper focus, hasn't it, really, what we've been through?
much sharper focus.
Yeah.
But it is tangible now.
Yeah, it's tangible now. It's more tangible, isn't it? And do you have anything you want to add to that, Dan?
I suppose we I think always, Kirsten and I as a leadership team have always communicated, and I think we've got share similar values, and it's brought us together in lots of ways, and that we can't help ourselves but really talk passionately about what we want for our school and everyone that's part of that. So I just it's
funny, isn't it? Because we're not just knowledge delivery systems. You know, there's a whole person there, and the sphere of influence that we have over the children is far and wide, and it reaches far beyond the curriculum itself. And so whilst we've set up very well, and I'm sure you did the same, online learning in this last year or so, whether it's Google Classrooms or whatever we're using, to deliver the knowledge, there's something missing, isn't there?
Yeah.
And that missing bit is the deep down thing. That's the connection that we have with the children. And similarly, there's a deep down connection that you have with the staff. I'm quite interested in that bit,
Yeah, and I think we really felt that this September coming back, that the whole child, I think I've talked for years about this is about the whole teacher in which is why this appealed. But we've talked a lot about the whole child, and it isn't just one child learning maths and English and certain subjects at school and another child at home who's being educated differently. Actually, it's a shared responsibility for parents and school and carers and people with wider responsibilities within those structures like governors, to actually share that responsibility of educating the whole child. And that's what we felt on the playground. And again, it's completely unmeasurable, as is a lot of these things, but if we were measuring it, we'd say there were less children crying because the parents were less anxious, because the parents seemed to be really confident. I mean, they might have just been fed up of all the homeschooling and everything else and just say, have the children. But it really was, it was quite wonderful to feel that we were in a family, a community. And I think that's what it is something that's really important to us. And the fact that was there, and teachers are smiling and greeting families and children, and that they're happily walking in a September, that is a really powerful piece of evidence for us to say that the culture shift has happened, and it's what we wanted to happen, because it could look differently. It could look differently. Definitely.
There's a newfound respect in a way, isn't there, actually, as many parents have said, gosh, it's actually quite hard, this teaching malarkey, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it's that they realise that what their children missed is that it wasn't their learning as well. So they know that it's hard at home to do the teaching, but they, in terms of what they knew their children missed when they couldn't come to school for some of that time, if they were not able to, was they missed their friends. And even if some of them were able to come to school, they weren't coming to typical school. It wasn't the same. They couldn't run around in the playground and mix all, because we were all in bubbles and things. So I think the parents realised that their children are learning and being educated by an awful lot more than the national curriculum.
That's it. That's the key bit.
And so the partnership's there, and that's strong.
That's the bit.
Good.
Lovely. Yeah, completely get that. My own 4 children have really missed the well, they say they have. I think they have. Whether they know they have or not, then they've still missed the reassuring presence of a teacher at their side, not on a screen, at their side, projecting unshakable belief in them. So I suppose the next question for me is, how do you project that same unshakable belief, and how do you reassure the whole teacher at your side if you're next to them? So you have the student, you have the reassuring presence of a teacher next to them, you're actually reassuring that. So how do you support the whole teacher in your place? Because I know you've got some really interesting views on this, more than, or not only their professional skills that are, of course, are very important. How do you support the whole person?
I suppose, Andrew, knowing as Kirsten's our head and our school, as you do, and I think you'll probably know that relationships are at the heart of what we do. And I think it's our teachers, our people first and foremost. So really knowing them, knowing their strengths, knowing their individual needs, and really prioritising and knowing genuine investment in both their professional and personally is something that we kind of pride ourselves on, really. So I suppose that's where it took us to a kind of a fresh look at our appraisals and our professional development through the pathway, but also in other areas of school. I suppose things like looking at how useful things like staff polls were to us, and the information that collects, and what we do and action in response to those. How useful was that? But perhaps replacing it with, we're now looking at things like self-service sessions, to invest time in actually one-to-one sessions, talking about just dialogue around their professional goals, aside from the appraisal, but also just knowing kind of that reconnection with what their purpose is again. What's at their core, what is it that their vocation, their mission, that their passions are, really needs time to discover what each individual teacher is. They've got different goals, they've got different aspirations, and I think it's easy to presume them. And actually having, from my experience, speaking to some colleagues, that actually do a phenomenal job, but just say, I love what I do and I'm content with what I do. And yes, I want to continue to improve and develop. But no, that doesn't mean I want you to put me on a path for leadership.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think in terms of the whole teacher, it's listening to them and really trying to see what motivates them. And I've used the motivation guide on the pathway a lot. It's a really good starting point, I found.
Understanding what motivates and what demotivates them in their job. Yeah,
I think we've really found that what motivates people isn't necessarily the things that they're good at, which it does touch on, and that's been really true for us. And that actually sometimes when teachers, are finding things hard, ourselves included, that actually the bit we need is the bit that we motivate us, whereas actually it might be an additional workload, but sometimes spending time doing the things that fill you have been really beneficial. That's really kind of come through in the motivation that we've given to staff.
Brilliant. So I've scribbled a few things down there, and knowing them well, you began with, Dan, and I thought that was such a good way to begin, actually, because it really is, isn't it? There wasn't there a phrase, I'm sure maybe it was a war film or something I saw not long ago, where the officers were saying that they know their troops like their mothers know them. Do you know what I mean? It's just lovely. It's lovely. It's that kind of unconditional care. It's caring deeply for the staff without necessarily caring what they think of you. It's not a popularity contest, this job. It just isn't. I still care for them though. And getting to know them beyond the superficial level of knowing is key, isn't it? And those micro affirmations rather than micromanagement moments, those micro affirmations of actually that was a cracking job there. So and listening, you said as well, and then we got into motivation, and that's so key as well. How do you wrap this up into a strategy then? I mean, you mentioned motivation there, Kirsten, which is really interesting. I'm massively interested in that. What do you do then once you've kind of used the guide on pathway or used your own resources to really understand what motivates them? You can't give them what they want, what motivates them all the time, every day.
No, we can't give them that all the time. We've spent some time, I suppose, trying to see what fits in where. So we started the year with a staff meeting that was around for all the staff, including all support staff, everybody, to understand what our school priorities would be in terms of strategic planning and how they fit into that. Dan, I don't know, did you want to talk a bit more about how we're balancing those targets with individual professional developments? We've done a lot of work on that.
Yes, so I suppose we, by giving them the insight into how they fit into that bigger picture and the whole school drive in terms of improvement, is something that I think really for a lot of them, no matter whether it was teacher or support staff or other members of staff that thought, actually, I am contributing to this. Kirsten talks about that you know, you've got the front of the box puzzle, and you know, that where we all fit into that, and you can't do it on your own. So
yeah, true.
We've talked about, actually, we've got some really shared projects and shared goals and motivations, and that actually that collaboration really helped in bringing colleagues together to not go it alone. So actually there are times, you're right, Andrew, when you know, it's not the easiest and it's not the most motivating job or the task or the, you know, whatever it is that they need to do, but actually they can see past that, you know, because
absolutely. They can see past that. Yes,
they can see the vision of where we're going. And we're going there together, and we're all going in the right direction for the right reasons, and we're a force when we go together. So
that's lovely. I love that. I'm going to
think it's about making it really clear, that vision.
We're a force.
Yeah.
So sorry, Kirsten, you're about to jump in before we move on to the next one.
Yeah, no, I was just, I've forgotten what I was going to say. I think I was just going to say that it really has helped us to have discussions with individuals about what they want to achieve, because whilst we have got those shared projects, actually that sharing has sometimes been in unexpected ways that we might have a senior leader, a class teacher and a teaching assistant who are actually all quite interested in the impact of good oracy for children, and actually that's created little working groups, which has been really beneficial. We haven't created the working groups yet, we are in the process of creating those. It's not anything done, it's the sort of appraisal process that we've just done, and we have got a couple of people who are sort of standing out as actually they've got quite an individual project that they're quite interested in.
Right.
Some of the people who have come to us with things, we have had to say, do you know, that is really, really interesting. We can't right now fit it within this picture that we're trying to create for the school, but it's really great still to know about what motivates you in it, so that it's not that we're able to just say, great, this person wants to go on this course and that course. We've been able to shape some really good discussions with individuals around what aspects then could be utilised to be useful for their development as well as for the children.
So I think that's fascinating, and I hope very much to achieve that here. Actually, I'm 6 days into post, so it's unlikely to be knocked over yet, but I mean, that's very much the sort of approach I like. In order to have meaningful conversations like the ones you've just described, you really want staff to be investing in themselves and seeing any efforts with CPD, and I think maybe sometimes it's an unhelpful phrase because it immediately makes you think that you're having something done at you. How do you move staff beyond seeing CPD as just another thing you're giving them to do?
So I think that for us starts with us. I think the modelling is really important. It's a responsibility as a school leader, in amongst everything else that you do, to be a lead learner. I think it's important that we model that, that we show interest and curiosity. You know, we're living in a time of education where there's such a phenomenal amount of research. 15, 20 years ago, you wouldn't have had access to educational research like we have. I would have had the old theorists of Piaget and
research
things. But
watching Grange Hill.
Yeah, watching Grange Hill. But now we have all this current research, and that makes education really exciting at the moment. And I think that dare I say, even Ofsted has gone down the route of using research and actually backing up what they're saying with research. So that makes it really exciting. So I think that's a really good starting place for us. I think that it's something that we need to give time to. We've created time where, when we took on Pathway, we thought, right, well, we need to make sure we give time to this. So we've put in a staff meeting every half term, and opened the door to, if people would like to spend some time, but they really don't feel they have the time, then please come and talk to us, because actually they might need an afternoon, like you might go to a course. Actually say to us, I'd really like some cover, because I want to be able to spend a bit of extra time on something that I can see and hear. And the benefit is they can go home and have a cup of tea and sit on the sofa and do it, and then they can come in. And because lots of people can access it in different time, like I wasn't able, we had a staff meeting last week that was using the how to kind of address gaps and disadvantage, and that was a really beneficial piece of work to do with our whole staff together. But actually I wasn't able to be there, but that was fine, because I'd been able to watch everything in advance. Took some of the reflection questions out that I felt were most relevant for the staff, and then Dan was able to do that. And even though we're having to do all our staff meetings virtually at the moment, actually it still worked. And we had a staff member afterwards emailing some things saying, oh, there's some notes that I've picked out of it. And I think having that shared dialogue. So I think key is us modelling learning and being really motivated ourselves. I think giving time to it, and I think giving the creation of a shared project, making it purposeful. I think it gives ownership to the staff. I think they want to then by default be motivated. And I think the word empowerment is then why that's naturally fallen from development, which is CPD, to CPE, which has been kind of coined there in Pathway. With it is empowerment, because we're not necessarily telling people then they're interested, they want to share things, and that's where we wanted it to be, because we didn't want to just put something in place where teachers feel, oh, I've got to go on this course, I've got to go and do this, I've got to come back and feedback. Actually, there was a dialogue, and it's creating time for both the training and opportunities to explore, and the dialogue afterwards is just as important for us, isn't it? Just
Andrew, can I just add that I think that what I found as the staff meeting last week, and as an example, is actually feedback I've heard is that the Pathway, by the nature of its design, with think pieces and the video, the round the tables, and actually that suits different, like children, and that suits different teachers. And they said, oh, I really like that bit best, and almost like the well-being and section and things like that. I think it's by its design actually promotes that it's more than you go off to a course in isolation and with all best intentions. I know I've been there. You leave with motivation, but actually it soon dwindles. It's soon diluted when you get back. It's not live. It's not like when we had
true.
We were listening to the round the table, and you can't help but think your school, your context, your children, and you just want to then, it's up and running and live, and you can go with it then, rather than kind of like a little bit removed when you attend some courses.
Yeah, I agree. I've been on so many where I come back, and then some of them are terrific, by the way. So none of us are just knocking all CPD that's held at I'm not going to say this. I always say the same hotel in the same town. Bobby, my colleague, knows I'm about to say it. I'm not, but there's always the same sort of place, with similar carpet and coronation chicken sandwiches and all that sort of stuff. So it's always the same. But I often come away from those thinking, well, actually, okay, so the person at the front knows it, and the people on my table seem to be a bit more genned up on this than I am. And you get that sinking feeling that I remember, queuing up outside the sports hall for my GCSE exam. You think, hang on, is everyone else prepared better than I have? And that is far from being empowering. I think that's very disempowering, actually, and quite disheartening. So, but I agree, Dan, that it needs to be made wholly relevant to me now in my room. But the conduit for that surely is you, isn't it? That's the point. It's your reflections that matter most. And I think Pathway is fashioned so that you can reflect and continuously reflect on what's changed, what's better, what's worse, how can I be 1% better tomorrow than I was today, and all that sort of stuff, you know. So it's almost a dialogue with yourself. But the cruelest irony for me is that those who would derive the most value from something like this are often those who perhaps might be lacking some self-confidence or self-worth, if I'm brutally honest about it, for whatever reason, and yet they would derive the most value from it. But they might be the ones who are perhaps the most reluctant to do it. And they're the ones who might perhaps even have a trace of that awful thing called cynicism, which will mean, oh, is this something else you're giving me to do then, Kirsten? And you're stuck in that vicious loop. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
you're not where you are at Hemingford.
Well, I think that's actually almost takes us back to the beginning where we were with that question.
In a way.
Shift though, because I think part of the shift in terms of how we are leading our staff is that we don't want it to be okay, so you come and ask us and we tell you, because we don't know everything, and that's that's very apparent.
You don't.
You become very de-skilled. Dan and I were laughing about it earlier, is that yourself, once you're in headship and you're in effect managing a business and all the other elements, actually your knowledge of improving outcomes in the classroom decreases, because you spend
inevitably
quality assuring and checking that various other systems and processes are in place to enable to function, not to and to improve, and putting strategic plans in place, and that actually direct feedback on improving teaching for outcomes of pupils. We don't want to be in a position where we're just telling people. We want people to be discovering through research, through pedagogical discussions, and we want them to have the autonomy to be able to do that, which is where Pathway is nice. And we want to be able to, with those questions of reflection, which kind of brings us back to where we were, that reflection is really helpful when you can ask the kind of coaching questions about, but how might that look for you, and where is it you want it to go, and what might success look like, and what will be the steps to get you there. And that's the process that is really empowering for our staff, is that we're not giving them the answers. We don't want them to go on a course and get the answers. We want them to come back together, have reflection time, have open dialogue questions, pedagogical discussions about what is best for the children, and make the actions, because that's what has impact ultimately on children's outcomes.
Absolutely, amen to that. And I couldn't agree more. And that is the balance, isn't it? And you're right about how obviously both the operational demands and the strategic demands of this job do sometimes take you out of the classroom a little bit more. So we're certainly not going into classrooms with all the answers. We've had a great question from Angela. So thank you, Angela. And we'll pause now just to take it, if that's okay. Angela says, it's refreshing to hear, I can't read. It's refreshing to hear that you as leaders are rethinking professional development and redefining school improvement. I offer professional partner support to help schools do this and flip top-down accountability models of improvement to bottom-up staff-led improvement. I'd be interested to know if your model is improving your priority areas, but supporting staff development from their starting points at the same time, I suppose. I think you're arguing that it is. And is it improving, or is it improving both development areas? And is it creating cohesion? So some good points to think about there. I think you're mindful of whole school and individual, aren't you? Targeted.
Very much. And actually, I think that keeping everything in full cycle is I just really like it. And that's, it helps me to see that things are having impact. I suppose it's that evidencing that things are having impact. And Dan and I were only speaking earlier on about some work that we've done that's actually very much about individual pupils and their barriers. So I suppose it's linking with we're focusing a lot on one of our big school focuses at the moment is this gap for the children who are disadvantaged educationally in some format or another, whether it be by an SEN diagnosis, a current SEMH need. It might be that it's a broader category of pupil premium and disadvantaged. It might be a diagnosed SEN need. It could be a current family circumstances. And for all of those children wanting to put in pupil profiles, which mean that we have got a really clear evidence bank that then goes into our provision mapping. And actually, when we're looking at provision mapping, we've been looking at what that looks like in terms of quality first teaching, what that looks like in terms of targeted support, and what that looks like for whole school initiatives. And actually, in looking at all of those different parts, we're able to tie our links straight back on all our documentation about how that fits in with our strategic development plan. And because we're able to tie those things in, we can say, okay, so yes, we know that we've got some work to do with parents. Was some, we were talking earlier about how we want to build resilience in our parents, and there was something else we were talking about with parents that we wanted to do. Dan, what was that? I can't remember now. We had a lot of discussions. Workshops, yeah, we were talking about workshops with parents in to get them engaged, and there's just so many different elements that we were talking about that actually are already on our strategic plans. The strategic plans are then feeding into our appraisals, and then teachers are choosing things, staff are choosing things that they're interested in, and we're thinking, great, okay, because that can tie into our strategic plans. That's in turn feeding into the improvements for quality first teaching or targeted intervention and whole school strategies. And it's starting to draw all the cycles together, all those different feedback loops, to be able to evidence that where we are going is moving in the right direction for staff development, individual pupils, our school as a whole. That's really nice. So I don't know whether that answers the question, Angela, but that's
no, it does.
my initial response to being able to pull all those elements together, and it not being something that's in isolation, because often CPD or a plan for an intervention or something, they don't all tie up, and that's where I think we're trying to keep all of those loops.
Absolutely. Well, I think that brings us very nicely to the next question. And maybe you might have said everything you want to say on that one, but Angela's question is very similar to my next one, which was, of course, how you do balance the whole school targets with and initiatives with individual professional development needs. And I think that's exactly what you've just articulated. But just to give you a chance, was there anything else you wanted to add to that? Because I know you were expecting me to ask that one anyway, actually. So thank you, Angela, for segueing into it so nicely. Dan, was there anything to add on that? How do you balance both whole school and individual?
I suppose to add to what Kirsten has said, I think the key is exactly that balance, where actually we're not to lose sight of what we have identified as our priorities, and we were quite clear about that. So as part of the appraisal process, we said that there would be 3 targets, and the first 2 would very much be linked to our whole school priorities, and that third one, I think we were quite brave, because we had discussions about actually having a third target that was so open and teacher or staff and personal led, that actually we talked about we could have scenarios where they just didn't know what they wanted to focus on, or it was something that we wouldn't be able to facilitate, but we kind of kept it simple and thought actually that third target needs to have, in its purest form, 2 criteria, and they need to be, does it benefit the children? Okay, that's probably a good place to start. And does it benefit you? Because it's your, it's you that's going to invest energy and time into that. And actually, in its simplest form, that is what we said target 3 would be about.
Absolutely.
And we're both presently surprised that that third target was, like we've mentioned earlier, often there were similar threads that we could go actually around oracy or other areas that we could say, did you know we've got other colleagues in our school that also share this interest? We could have some work where we could have working parties and things like that. So I think we're quite clear in terms of those 3 targets with our appraisal.
Doing both, yeah. So how do we know when it's working? How do we know that it's having an impact? That's the key thing as well, isn't it? How do we know that the CPD levers that we're pushing and pulling are actually doing anything? What's the indicator of that? Tough one, isn't it?
I think we were at the beginning of that because
Yeah.
because we had not very long in leadership before we have navigated a pandemic, and so this is our first
Fair
opportunity to kind of have a proper go at running a school.
Fair point. Fair point.
And it's, yeah, I think it's happening. It's starting to happen. I think we've put all the right building blocks in place, and I think the positive change is happening. Dan, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think how would we know? And I'd say that like Kirsten said, we were at the start of that journey, but actually it feels right right now. How do we know that? I kind of, when we reflected upon it, I sort of thought, what would you see, hear, feel if you came to Hemingford and which we are using with our staff? And I thought what you'd see, lots of collaboration. So whilst targets are personal, they're maximised when they're shared. So we've got lots and lots of colleagues who have professional dialogue throughout their day, within staff meetings, and that bringing them together are opportunities. So we've got, for example, so rather than individual curriculum leads, we've got curriculum teams. So any opportunity, we're encouraging staff to work together.
Great.
You'd hear, as I said, constant professional dialogue. So questions are being asked of each other. So, whether that's around what have you watched on Pathway, or if it's about, oh, could I just talk about what you're doing in this phase, because it's about that consistency across the school. And lots of they know that they're trusted and they have that autonomy to explore and to come to us. So when I say there's lots of that dialogue, that's with us as well, asking us our opinions on that, and us also asking them. And then what would you feel? I think you'd feel empowered staff. I'd like to think that it's a community of people that have this sense of pride and a confidence in what they're doing. That's
Well said, Dan.
Completely agree with that. And the idea of coming to your school, I've actually just been noting it down on my iPad. What would you see, hear and feel at our school as a pupil, as a parent, as a member of staff? I think it's terrific. I think that's absolutely terrific. I love that, because that's a surefire way of viewing the whole person in front of you and understanding how their holistic experience, that experiential knowledge is just as valid as the bit that they've been lectured at.
Yeah.
Terrific. So as you said at the top, actually, Kirsten, early days, I don't mean for you as a leader, but for the new approach to CPD that you're employing. And as you rightly said, just on the back of a global pandemic. So, but it's going to be really interesting to stay in touch, if we may, and find out the efficacy of what you're doing and what the metric is. Because I'm sure as anything that the metric isn't just grading the professional skills, if you like, of the person in front of you as a knowledge delivery system, i.e. via the attainment and progress scores of the students. There's more than that, isn't there? So love it. Really, really interesting to see what happens. So I'm guessing I know the answer to this, but just in the last few minutes, if you don't mind, what attracted you to the? And I'm not here just asking you to wear a Pathway t-shirt and a cap with the name on, but
I've got a cup. Do you want me to get my cup out?
Well, look, you spent time writing an absolute belter of a piece in the NEHT Leadership Focus magazine. I think my colleague Bobby, I can say your name probably now. My colleague Bobby is actually going to be sharing this in the link, actually. If you haven't read it yet, check it out. It's in the latest Leadership Focus magazine for the NEHT. Kirsten wrote a double-page article. It's really interesting. So you're obviously fully invested in the idea of holistic sort of approach to CPD. What are your hopes for it in the future? How will you know it's working? And what attracted you to it in the first place, I suppose?
I think what attracted me initially was ultimately how much staff had given in a pandemic where we need to value this profession, whether it is, I've got, some of my preschool staff, whether it's TAs, whether, head teachers, whoever, whatever your role is in a school, ultimately, you're educators of children, young minds,
Awesome.
futures. And I think, you know,
Yeah.
we feel really passionate about the futures that our pupils will have and giving them the best they can. And just cannot get to giving children amazing futures if you don't look after the adults who are needing to educate those children. So ultimately, that's what appealed first, was that we could just keep filling staff with knowledge and more skills of how to be good teachers. But actually, we all know that it's, you know, it's hard work being in the classroom, it's hard work educating young minds, and it takes an awful lot from yourself. And even more so from a pandemic, you know, these teachers have dug deep and learned new skills. And actually, did we need to give them more of new knowledge, or did we need to give them something where they actually had a toolkit and a opportunity to have dialogue within a fairly straightforward framework where they could reflect on what makes them great teachers and give time to reflect on where they wanted to take those skills and development. So I think that was the initial appeal for me. Where I want to see it go is for staff to own the pathway, I suppose, is that their pathway, like Dan was saying, isn't about whether or not they want to step into a leadership position and they want to go on one of, you know, a specific course to enable that. It's actually about what is it I want to achieve? Well, actually, I've got 3 children who are in my class and they're dyslexic, and I don't know how to quite overcome that. Actually, there are barriers to children's learning, which I would like to explore more. So that ownership is, I want staff from the back of this to feel that this is a natural way of developing themselves, that actually they're more keen to go and listen to, as we keep saying, you know, listen to a podcast, listen to, you know, professional development doesn't need to be defined by I've been on a course. It's that you've had a great professional pedagogical discussion with your colleagues. If you've come away from that saying, oh, actually, I've learned something because I've really stopped and considered, or I will do something differently, that could be from a podcast, it could be from an article. And for staff to come in and be sharing that, you know, we had a great example where we've got quite a different approach to writing at the moment. Well, that hasn't come top down, that's come from something on a social network platform that one of our teachers had found, and she isn't the English lead, but she found it, she thought it was great, she went on some training, and it has kind of snowballed. So that's really powerful for us, because that's the empowerment we want. So moving forward, that is that fine line for us, is that we can't just have a whole new writing scheme come in because somebody found one and thought it was good. It's about, for us, that leadership of managing the process in a school with 50 staff when people have all got different ideas. It's keeping it tight within how are the children going to benefit from this, and how can we be working collaboratively on this to ensure that we've got consistent approaches. But that so far seems to be aligning well, and I'd probably say those things align well when you have a clear vision for your school and where you want to go, because ultimately people buy into working in a school where you will hold the same vision for children. And if you're under the undercurrent of what you're doing aligns with your vision and values, then hopefully we're going to achieve where we want to get to.
Absolutely brilliant summation, actually, of why you're interested in the pathway approach and how you've augmented it with all of your own expertise in order to drive things forward. I wish I worked at Hemingford Grey Primary, to be honest. That's probably not an ideal thing to say 6 days into the new role. I tell you what, let's rephrase that. Let's build some links so that we can learn from you. That would be fabulous. Dan, did you want to add anything to that in the last minute? Please do. Otherwise, we'll.
No, just
thank you for joining us.
I think it's been a huge learning experience for me in terms of just growth around being new to leadership, and that works for both Kirsten and myself, like in terms of the pathway and CPD and I think it's really thinking it's for everyone, you know, not just for teachers, but it's every member of staff that works in our school. Absolutely right. It is for everyone, and for them to invest in themselves, because everybody, I mean, I'm going to get all gushy and silly now, but you know, everybody matters. And I think I said at the very top of this, or I tried to, I think I was tired at the time. I'm woken up now. I'm ready to do it all again now. But no, I think, you know, this idea of self-care, you know, it's not self-indulgence, is it?
It's a duty. And everybody has that. And you said earlier on, didn't you, Kirsten, that whatever your role in a school, you're contributing to the education and to the life chances of the children in front of you. And to that extent, you matter.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
You matter. We've had a lovely comment from Lisa, actually. Thank you, Lisa. I've recently started the journey of leading performance management across the whole school with a drive to relaunch the process and attitudes towards it. This webinar has been very informative. Thank you. I'll echo that, Lisa. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And it sounds like you're going through a very similar phase at your school where you relaunch and reboot a broader approach to professional development of your staff, recognizing the whole person in front of you. So brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much. I think everybody's found this really, really helpful. I know I certainly have. I've been scribbling notes all the way through it. Actually, in case you thought I was distracted, I wasn't emailing. I was actually writing down.
Just getting on with a bit of work whilst we.
No. I was actually scribbling down loads of the things that you were saying because I thought it was beautifully put. Great. And I'm certainly in the next staff meeting, which I have Thursday night, I think. I'm going to say, look, let's consider what, if you, at the school, what would you see? What do you hear? What do you feel as a teacher and as a pupil and as a parent? And I love that. I think that's so lovely. So rather than just what do you think? Close with a brilliant quote from the great Eric Jensen, American educationist and author, saying that how we feel is what's real. It's the link to what we think. So true. So true.
So true.
Right. Well, in that case, talking about how we feel, it's ready for a cup of tea, isn't it, really? Before we have the second wind as leaders and we do it all again now for the next few hours. Brilliant. Great. Well, it just remains for me to say thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today.
Inviting us to join.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's been great to see you. I'm going to stick around for 5 minutes, and it will probably be no more than 5 minutes to do a quick walk through the Pathway program, just in case there's anybody out there in the world who hasn't heard of the Pathway program. So please feel free to join me for that, people on the call. But if you need to get going, please do. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. And thanks again to Kirsten and to Dan for a really interesting discussion. So thank you so much for that. Just going to share my screen again very, very quickly, and I'll just walk you through the program if there's anybody who has the time and they need to have a quick look through what it is we're actually offering. But before I do that, I'm just going to mention that we have another brilliant webinar, actually, Advice for the Current Times. Now, those of you who are on the call and have been on many of these will know that Guy Dudley is another brilliant speaker, head of advice, no less, at the NHT, has been for many years, on the back phone to head teachers and deputy head teachers for many years. And we do these every few weeks, and we'll do another one soon. So 9th of December, Advice for the Current Times with Guy, talking about all the different changes. We know that educational policy and practice is tweaked and changes quite frequently, doesn't it, in this country? So we'll have a look at any the latest headlines that you need to have in your inbox. That'll be great. So what is Pathway? Well, I can do this in 4.5 minutes, I think, actually. And if anybody wants to get in touch, of course, please do go on the website and you can find out much more about Pathway there. But essentially, working in partnership with the NHT, it's an online CPD offering, but it's unlike any other because of the holistic approach, as we've mentioned in this piece today. And if you combine professional development with the personal development that I think we've been talking about, by which I mean the motivation, ambition, well-being, aspiration, the deep down things, resilience, the things that kind of drew you into the job in the first place, really, you are entitled to have those topped up now and again, because it isn't just about the delivering the knowledge. So if you combine those two, I think that's how you get empowerment. And I think that's how you hold on to your agency in the job, by which I mean you've got the skills, you have the knowledge, you've been given a bit of scope to actually have some autonomy here, and you want to see the impact that you're making. And seeing the impact as a teacher is what motivates you. And then we go round and round, because a motivated teacher is the best self who has the biggest impact on the children. And that's that cyclical thing. So key to all of this is having agency in the role and knowing that you are actually good enough and you're not a fake who will be about to be found out. You are good enough, and you're modeling it to the children every day. So 3 sections: orientate your career, navigate your way to success, and reflect, by which I mean identify your motivations and your professional skills and your career ambitions. Navigate your way through the multiple different online courses that we offer, and then reflect using the Wellbeing Programme and that brilliant advice hub from, of course, Guy Dudley, Head of Advice at the NHT. 3 sections. The first section then is made up of those 3 areas that I've just listed: the motivation guide, a skills audit, and some career mapping tools to help you to chart what's important for you in the roles that you're going to secure in the years ahead, and the extracurricular activities, wider interests that are important. How can you grow those in the years ahead? And finally, and perhaps most importantly, your health and well-being goals. How are you going to push those on and grow those and develop yourself from a health and well-being point of view in the years ahead for the long run? So it isn't a short-term career that perhaps some people are having more and more, even when they're not intended to leave. Some are leaving prematurely, and perhaps it may not be because of a lack of CPD opportunities. CPD is everywhere. I think it might be because of a lack of personal development opportunities. So that's what that career map is for, to map and chart the whole you in the years ahead. And then the navigation, as I mentioned, we have over 21 different courses within the program itself. Pathway is not one course, it's multiple different courses delivered by some absolutely brilliant, authentic experts in their role. And every course is modeled, here are some courses here. Every course is modeled in the same way, with films, thought pieces, and questions for reflection. And those questions for reflection encourage you to write what you think, how you feel. As a result of what you're listening to, what are you going to change? And then subsequently, is it better? Is it worse? How do you make it 1% better the next day? It's about that reflective practice. And these are all authentic experts who know what they're talking about. Many of them are still doing their job in schools right now, whether they're full-time or consulting or visiting or writing books about teaching. So authentic experts and speakers here will really help you reflect on your own practice. And that's how every course is built, really, with intros, roundtable discussions, other discussions, one-to-one interviews. Never an expert staring at you, narrating a PowerPoint at you. This is not CPD that's being done at you. We hope it's much more of a consensus-based thing, where we're going around the table discussing on the films, quite often actually where it went wrong, frankly, showing our vulnerability, and then eventually beginning to help you get to the place where it's going well and it's going right. And you know why it's going right, that sort of conscious sort of competence. And then finally, the reflection section. Professor Tim O'Brien and his writing partner, Dr. Dennis Guiney, have put together a unique, brilliant program, a wellbeing program for us within the Pathway, and it's all within the Pathway subscription. And I think it's terrific. And it's about wellbeing and critical reflection, encouraging you to conduct your own sort of mini research project into wellbeing in your school and understanding what it is, and importantly, what it isn't. I think it's a much misunderstood concept and idea. It's more than an idea, it's a real thing, but it's often misunderstood, and how you can be empowered to manage your own well-being. And that's a very empowering place to be. And then the Advice Hub, 12 different categories filled with PDF resources. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of resources we're uploading and constantly updating them to keep you on the straight and narrow, to keep you up to speed with the latest changes, policy and practice, statutory guidance, and so forth, exemplars, and a newsletter every half term to really, in all those different categories, to really keep you up to speed with what you need to know. Right, a few shots from some of the courses that we have. So, in summary, authored and presented by authentic leaders and teachers, sharing their knowledge and expertise, delivered online, all online, which means that with your own individual logins, so you can work through each course at a time and pace to suit you, and you can keep coming back to the courses filled with your own reflections. And for those questions for reflections, you can write an answer that is one word, one sentence, or a 10,000 word thesis long. It's up to you, and you can keep coming back. Putting all your reflections to all the courses, your answers, if you like, together, really we're talking about a continuous professional learning journal. And that, I think, is a new offer, and I think it's a reflective offer, which is what it's about. It's about being a reflective practitioner, promoting self-investment and self-care, which, as we've said from the beginning, is not a self-indulgent thing to do. Right, I hope that's been useful for you. Thanks so much for staying on the call all this time. Enjoy the rest of your evening. It's time for a cup of tea. Thanks very much. See you again soon.